So I finished watching the 6th episode of season 2 of Strange New Worlds, it being entitled Lost in Translation. So this is predominantly an Uhura episode. And like the Uhura episode of season 1, this was another phenomenal episode. So I should set the stage for the story, because the heart of the story, of the plot, is Uhura's character story. Sure, there's the overarching plot. The Enterprise joins the Farragut at a deuterium refinery to help repair it and get it up online. Basic stuff in that. But of course, things don't go the way it should be, because one of the stations in bad disrepair, just accidents, including an act of sabotage, and that character is actually hallucinating the same stuff that Uhura is hallucinating and hearing, because Uhura is much later along. And she's because of that character, and I think being being a communication officer, more open to other forms of communication, is able to, over the course of the episode, put together that it's actually some kind of alien species trying to communicate with Starfleet about what's going on. Now, this doesn't happen right away, and it's in part thanks to James T. Cook and also Sam Cook that we get to figure it out, because James T. Cook makes his second appearance in Strange New Worlds Season 2, though this time it's actually the Prime timeline cut and not an alternate timeline. But you know what? That's still great. We got to see this interpretation of Cook, which is just excellent. This is much more TOS style Cook rather than Kelvin timeline Cook, but you can see hints of the Kelvin timeline. Probably that makes sense because this is also a slightly younger Cook. He is only just becoming the first officer of the Farragut, which, by the way, in the alternate timeline episode of that season, Balance and Mercy, Errand and Mercy, regards episode 10 of season 1, guess who was captain of the Farragut? Makes sense, because the Farragut was the ship that Cook was on before he joined the Enterprise. But that's getting a little sidetracked. So, Cook basically helps Uhura realize, Uhura is struggling with basically accepting death, and actually with Cook's advice about basically confronting and not letting death win, and that she doesn't confront it, she lets death win, that she won't be able to, by that little bit of advice that he gives her, she's able to realize what the aliens are doing, and also a few other things too, and also listening to some recordings of the former chief engineer Hemner walking her through something. Those two things together, she realized the aliens are trying to communicate with her, and that the singer is overpowering, but but her subconscious, her communication cortex, whatever, is able to put it all is grasping stuff from her mind to try to make sense of it to communicate the message. And once she realizes that, first, she actually goes, and this is when we bring in Sam Cook, who's a xenoanthropologist, so basically a person who studies aliens and that kind of stuff. They're able to piece together what's really going on. Aliens who are probably interdimensional, but attached to the individual deuterium molecules, atoms, are being harmed by the refinery process. So they're able to tell Pike what's going on, and tell him that they have to shut down the refinery. But of course, the refinery, they finally got it up and running, but the problem is they can't shut it down. So it's actually probably a good thing that they decide to destroy it to save the aliens. And that's what they do. They also, of the deuterium that they harvested in this episode on their own ships, they vent as well, just because of the alien life. Strange New Worlds, and to explore strange new worlds and seek out new life, new civilizations. That is Star Trek. And another just neat thing that they did with that, I mentioned they had collected some deuterium. We actually got to see the Broussard collectors actually collect deuterium. First time I think we've ever seen that. But of course they didn't end up using it because of the alien life. But this actually reminded me of an episode of TOS where they actually find a silicon-based light from that bunch of miners thought were just rocks. So kind of, I like that little, I don't think that was an intentional parallel, but still, it was a neat little thing. And of course, this is actually the first time we get to see Sam and James Cook actually interact with each other. and it kind of sounds like Sam has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. James Cook is the one who's advancing in his career, and is doing everything that their father would want, while Sam only got their father's name, because Sam is his middle name. So it sounds like Sam has maybe a bit of a chip on his shoulder for that, while Cook is like, hey, you're xenoanthropologist. I may not understand it all, but hey, that's what you do, and I'm proud of you for everything that you've done. Like, Jim is being a good brother about all that. But of course, I do like how Sam's like, says, I'll write a paper on what we've discovered, which makes sense. It's his job being a xenoanthropologist, I'm just saying. But the episode ends with Uhura introducing Cook to Spock. So this is actually the first time that those two characters meet in the prime timeline. Gotta make sure I specify prime timeline because of what happened a couple episodes ago with the long episode. But I do kind of like it. It's like, it was treated respectfully. It was like sure, it was at the end of the episode signifying its importance, but they didn't linger on it. They just treated it ever so slightly. But one thing to note, when Uhura and Cook actually met, that was right after, let's see, who did, I'm trying to remember, was it, yeah, Uhura stopped and talked a little bit with Chapel and Spock while they were playing a game of 3D chess and also talking about their possible relationship. Well, apparently Spock became distracted by that conversation, and sounds like he was within 2 moves of a checkmate according to Cook, who was observing it all. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but I have a feeling it wasn't necessarily Uhura who distracted Spock. I'm just saying. But it's hard to say as well, but it's very interesting to take a note of. But I did like how they kind of, loosely touch on the plot line from Charades and just let it move on, let it keep it in the background. They did that a lot. Same thing with, because of the long episode of that being tomorrow, Lalonde developed a feelings for an alternate timeline Cook, and now she's awkward around the real Cook, which makes no sense. Like, sure, they kept that up, but they didn't make it the focus of the episode. They didn't linger on it at all. They had one scene where they meet up, and Lon says his name, and Pike like, you know each other, and Lon simply says, long story for another time, and that's it. That's all they do, but it's just enough to hint at, okay, there's still some complicated stuff going on there. She still has a crush on him, but that's not the story of the episode. We don't need to focus on it. And I mentioned those couple of things because all those 3 things I just mentioned, Spock and Chopper's relationship, Cook meeting Spock, and of course Lon and Cook, all that stuff. Sure, they were given a brief moment, but it never lingered. Especially with the Cook meeting Spock. Sure, that's a big event for us fans, but in timeline, yeah, it was just a meeting of 2 people. It didn't need to be momentous. Like, I honestly felt the meeting of Cook and Spock in the Calvert timelines was given maybe too much attention. While here it's like, yep, 2 officers happen to meet each other. Simple as that, introduced by a mutual acquaintance / friend of them. It makes perfect sense how it was, and I really do enjoy it. There's a few other things I could discuss, such as La'an having the same distance to Peli as Uhura does, both of which because she reminds them of I said his name earlier in the episode, but the previous chief engineer. I want to make sure I get his name right. Yeah, the name has totally blanked on me, but the former chief engineer, both of them are having the same thing. And of course it's addressed with Una and not with Uhura, but Uhura has it addressed more because of her family, which for the story made a little more sense, but the former chief engineer, he was a big part of it, and the crazy thing, they got the actor back and dressed him up basically in Andorian / anal zombie makeup. By the end of the episode, once Uhura has successfully communicated the needs of the aliens and that being taken care of, he becomes his normal self. So lots of visual symbolism there, and they really did such a good job on it. Like I said, this was an amazing episode, and I really did enjoy it. They also did a brief mention of the Gome, but again, they didn't dwell on it. All these things that were established in previous episodes, they touched on briefly here, but they didn't make it the focus of the episode, which makes it so good. And one last thing before I ask for your thoughts on this episode. In this episode, Pike is given the promotion to Fleet Captain, because that's what he was dressed at in the cage. And what's actually very neat about that is because if I remember correctly from the cage, Cook says the only time he actually met Pike was shortly after Pike was promoted to Fleet Captain. Again, they didn't dwell on that, they did not make that big deal, they just had Pike and Cook meet, and that was pretty much it. Sure, they talk of 1-2 other times in the episode, of course, but I do like how they kept that consistent, but they didn't treat it like a big deal. It was just a up and promising new first officer meeting a distinguished captain of Starfleet. That's what they treated it like, and that's what they did, and I really did like that. But that is where I'm going to end this review. I hope to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for watching, and live long and prosper. Thank you for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like, upvote, and share the video. Also consider subscribing and following the channel if you haven't done so yet, and to ring that bell on YouTube to get notified of when new videos release. The link tree in the description links to all my social media. Check it out if you are interested, and once again, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, good night, wherever you are. May the force be with you, always.